5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's good to have all of you here. Mr. Underwood, it's good to see you here before this body once again. You cited President Ford, I believe, Ms. Barco, in that this that he set up this panel. I mean, isn't it the case that the president can do this if he wants to?
Yes, I've urged him to do this, and he has not yet.
And isn't it the case that he could just reprioritize? I mean, we hear about this backlog. Can't he reprioritize this within his Department of Justice and say, we want to see more of these reviewed and the decisions expedited?
He can. That's a little bit trickier, to be honest. President Obama effectively tried to do that. He told the Department of Justice what he was interested in doing. It's very hard to get that machinery to crank out what the president wants, because you can see it's a bit of a bureaucratic mess. And it's hard to oversee that in a way that gets exactly what you want out of it. Yes, the president can do it. I would say the best thing he could do is to give the Department of Justice very clear categories, as Ms. Taifa pointed out, and that's the most effective way to get this organization. I'm
so glad that you bring up the bureaucracy, because we're going to comment on that later. That's one of the great concerns I have, having served in state government. Are we setting up a parallel bureaucracy that ends up just being a problem? I hope I say your name correctly, Ms. Taifa. You were talking about a categorical clemency or commutation or whatever. So do you believe we should have a broad class of people that should simply be given clemency? Or
what I'm talking about is a rebuttable presumption of release for specific targeted categories of persons. And there, I gave examples of a number of different categories, but it's not just a broad get out of jail free type of situation. It's a rebuttable presumption, meaning there will be a presumption, say if someone has served a certain amount of time, has complied with all the things they're supposed to comply with in prison, that they should be able to be granted release, a presumption of that. That could be rebutted by the prosecutor or whatever, but there should be some type of process that can be expedited, and that's one way of going about that.
Thank you for your answer in regards to that. I am also, I think we also have to really be mindful of victims in regards to this. I think about in the state of Wisconsin, our Governor Evers, who named his parole commission, just recently was going to parole someone who had a heinous record of a brutal murder, and the family was outraged that the parole commission that was named by Governor Evers, that they were going to let this person loose. And so I think we have to be very mindful of the victims also. Mr. Hurst, how often in the, let's say the last decade, does someone go to prison for simply a simple marijuana possession charge?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't have that in front of me.
Mr. Murray, can you answer that question? How often does somebody go to prison for a simple marijuana charge? Simple possession.
Sure. Almost never at this point in time. Only large quantities. Obviously, with the trend across the country as it relates to cannabis, there's less and less emphasis. Resources aren't available. We're inundated with meth and other more serious drugs, and the attitude is that we don't have the time or the resource to deal with marijuana.
So what you're saying, Mr. Murray, is it's pretty rare to see that. It's rare to see that happen.
Mr. Tiffany, I can tell you in 15 years as a federal prosecutor, 0 have been prosecuted in the Southern District of Mississippi for simple marijuana possession.
Yeah, okay. Just follow up, Mr. Hurst. What are the unintended consequences of, you've got 20 seconds to answer this. What are the unintended consequences of making this change?
Well, I think the unintended consequences is what Professor Barkow said, which is the president can just ignore it. And the problem is we're just creating more bureaucracy. If you look at the Fixed Clemency Act, we're putting more people on the federal dole, we're funding more retirements, we're funding more salaries, we're basically sending the taxpayers' dollars out for no apparent reason.
So thank you for that. And I'm just going to close with this. I am so glad you all brought this up in regards to the bureaucracy, because we see it everywhere in the federal government. It happens everywhere. When you hear us talking about natural resources, you hear us talking about any issues where there's huge impediments in the way. You see charts like that you could double the number of people that are in the way. That happens all over our federal government. We need to fix it, and I'm so glad you bring it up, and I'm glad you bring up negative decision bias that goes on in our federal government. I yield back.
Gentleman's expired. Now pleased to yield to the gentlelady from Missouri, Congresswoman Bush, our Vice Chair, for 5 minutes.
St. Louis, and I thank you, Chairwoman Lee, for convening today's crucial hearing. And thank you for your partnership and collaboration on such an urgent issue as clemency, which has been a top priority for me since I was sworn into office.